Okay, at 5:30 on December 12th, 2024, I will call the special meeting of the Village Board of Sister Bay to order. Roll call.
Berto,
Here.
Hausen,
Here.
Harf,
Here.
Warner,
Here.
Orozco,
Here.
Champeau, here, and Bell.
Here. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. So moved. Second by Orozco.
Okay, there was a motion by Housen, second by Orozco. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, comments, correspondence, concerns from the public, limited to 3 non-transferable minutes per person. We did get some correspondence this afternoon. Did everybody get a chance to see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anybody? Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment?
May I have a question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask.
Well, I mean, so this isn't a dialogue back and forth. This is a public comment period. So what'll happen is, I'm not saying you won't get an answer, but it's not like we can engage in a back and forth right now. So if you get it to us, we'll do our best to get you an answer. It just won't be immediate.
Okay, sounds good.
So now would be a time to make your comment, though, Roman.
Okay, so my name is Roman Kolag. I live at 105-343 Wood Court in Sister Bay, and I just received today in a mail a notice about post office relocation, and I wanted to ask what is this about? If the lease for the post office has been terminated, and why it has been terminated, and if it has been discussed somewhere prior to this decision, and what is the plan with the site?
Okay, without going into a back and forth, I will say that we do have a meeting with the post office tomorrow at 1:30. Julie and I do, and I would expect that'll be something we'll try and get you a better answer, or an actual answer and a dialogue back to you at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment?
Yes, can you hear
Yes.
us?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Roger and Paula, we were at the previous meeting,
Oakdale.
Oakdale. We picked up our mail at the post office today, and we read that thing that said they're being evicted by the city. We talked to, I think she's the postmaster, I'm not sure. But she said they like it there. They have plenty of room. Dealing with the post office is a tricky issue because they would love to get rid of, you have to be aware, they would love to see all these small post offices go away and have one post office, maybe Fish Creek, in which we'd all have to go to Fish Creek to get our mail. So you want to be a little careful with the post office.
Okay, I mean, I did get that same letter out there. I mean, like, again, I don't want to engage in a back and forth, but Julian and I do have a meeting at 1:30 tomorrow with the post office, and we will get some more information out after that meeting. Like I say, I can reach out to you further tomorrow, Roger, and we can have a conversation.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
What is the purpose of this meeting today?
The meeting today it's a special board meeting to go over what the finance committee went over on Tuesday. The finance committee can't just pass this, so it's got to go to the village board. So that's why there's this meeting today.
Well, the gentleman that came from, I guess, the accounting firm, he listed 5 options that were very complicated.
So we're going to get into that in item 5 when we get into discussion.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Okay,
Thing to say.
let's go on to item 5, discussion action items, resolution 2024-021, amending the CIP and 2025 budget. I think there was at least 4 of us there on Tuesday, so I won't rehash what happened there, but see, do we have Vlad on here? If we can talk about or Adam probably can discuss the options that we were looking at and how we can move ahead with that.
Yeah, I can start off, and then I'm going to obviously then pitch it to Julie for a little bit, and then also Amber, who is from the auditing firm as well, to kind of give you some information and insight. So what I'll do is just kind of quick give a summary of, obviously Baird's involvement again for some of the board members who weren't at the finance committee meeting. So again, we were brought in on June 19th, 2024 to assist with the evaluation and development of the annual 5-year CIP, and then assist the new finance director in working with him to submit the budget as has been done in years past. So the CIP again was updated utilizing a CIP template created by Baird in prior years. And then the budgetary process was followed through notes and through templates and processes that have been done for the past 7 years through the prior finance directors and administration, and followed from basically start to finish for not only Baird to get an understanding, this being our first time being involved in the budget process, as well as Vlad being obviously brand new to the process. So what we then obviously focused on with the staff was utilizing those templates. One of the goals that had been discussed was that the levy wanted to remain flat due to obviously the reassessment that occurred last year. So that was one of the directives that staff worked on in putting into those sheets to try to keep the levy flat, which then was supposed to keep the rate flat. What was discovered is that once that budget was completed, there was the public hearing then on October 21st. That's when everything was presented utilizing those templates. And then after that was adopted by the board, the levy amount. What happens then is there are processes then that the finance director works on as far as completing finalized sheets. So there is the levy limit worksheet and the statement of taxes, as well as the tax increment worksheet that go to the Department of Revenue. And then those sheets then are utilized to create the mill rate worksheet that then goes to the county to be processed with all of the other taxing jurisdictions. And then that creates a final tax bill. One of the final steps then that the finance director does is when they get kind of the estimate of those final tax bills, they take one of those bills, go back and look through all the process and see if everything matched. When Vlad did that, it was discovered that the tax bills were showing that there was a 10.8% increase in the village portion of the tax rate. That then in turn caused Vlad to reach out to me to ask about that process and what was going on. So then he sent me the worksheets that he submitted to the county, and we started looking back and discovering that there was a discrepancy, at least for the last 7 years, where the rate that has been approved by the board has been different than the finalized rate that has been submitted to the county. And one of the pieces of the puzzle of that is in regards to the tax increment. So there is when you create the tax increment worksheet after the levy has been adopted, that then in turn creates the tax increment that is needed to cover all of the projects then that are in your TIFs. And make sure that those particular parcels are then taxed to then help your TIF districts be able to do the projects that have been approved for that. So one of the things that was obviously discussed last night at the Finance Committee was that when we looked into the prior workbooks that have been used, that calculation has never been put into the finalized information that was brought forward to the board. And what that can do is cause fluctuations where your rate that is being approved may be different than the finalized rate. There are some municipalities that certainly do that, and that is their budgetary process. They only ever review it once, and then that information then goes to the tax entities to be processed for the bills. There are others that do specifically put into their workbooks that they want to see that calculation, so that they can determine if they want to make changes, if they want to reduce something, if they want to increase various forward. So that was the information that we found. So then it was discussed as in regards to what could be done to essentially, in regards to that 10.8%. So one of the things that we obviously did was started to have conversations with your auditors as well, to have them take a look at this, because we were concerned that if the goal was to keep the levy flat and that was done, why were we continuing to see this increase? Were there other factors that were playing? So those were conversations that we had today, and was asked that Amber would kind of take into that. We did have some conversations with the Department of Revenue as well. So what I want to do now is pitch it over to Julie, and then Julie then will pitch it over to Amber to kind of discuss what she has reviewed in regards to this. So Julie?
Sure. Adam covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about, but basically we've been trying to get as much information as we possibly can. Adam said we have information from CLA, our auditor, who is Amber, who's joining us. We've reached out to our attorney from Randy, so I do have some information on that when the time comes. And then we heard from Ryan Schley, who is our treasurer. And if we're gonna ask the county to rerun tax bills, I do have some information from Ryan on that, on the cost of what that would actually cost. So Amber, I think maybe we'll let you just get started, and then if we get to the point where we want to discuss, should we be rerunning checks, we can talk about what the treasurer shared with us and what the attorney had shared with us. So we'll let you kind of explain what happened with that rate. But first you'll have to unmute yourself, Amber.
There we go. Adam, you did a good job of summarizing that information. I think the key here is the calculations. They're not an error. It's just about a process, about how it's been done, how it's been communicated, and so forth. There's not an over levy situation. That's a very different situation that you would have. That is not this situation. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. So that would be a different type of compliance piece. Adam, you mentioned how some municipalities the TID value is not necessarily known until maybe November 15th-ish, and depending on when budget hearings happen and so forth, and how you're adopting your general fund budget or your capital project budget and so forth, you're using what you're projecting your levy to be. Those numbers that come in from the TID later, those have an impact. I personally, from an audit standpoint, I have communities, as Adam mentioned. Some go back and update. Some use the same increment as the prior year in their budget. But really what they're focused on is their operational piece. That's a big part of this. So the primary result of this significant change in this current year that you're seeing, so as Adam mentioned, for the past how many years, the process hasn't changed. But why are you seeing more significant change this year? Is because there's a couple key pieces. You had the reevaluation in 2023. You have a change in an assessment ratio from 2023 to 2024. That was a decrease of about 10%. That has a direct impact on the property tax bill that was increased and not as a decrease. So it will go the other way. You have the timing of the TID value. There are some in the assessment roll. There are corrections in the equalized value assessment roll. There's changes in there that have impacts on your total value at the end of the day. All of these factors come together, and they cause these changes. As Ryan alluded to in an email, and Ryan later, if you talk to from the county treasurers, this happens a lot. You have different assessment ratios, you have different equalized values and changes, and it can have a significant impact, but understanding how those all come together is really the key piece. Again, I want to make sure I reiterate, it is not an over levy situation. The county actually, or the village actually under levied the maximum of what they could levy. That's very important. That's not, you don't have a compliance situation. The next piece, you cannot issue a tax rebate. You would have to go through the process of redoing tax bill, recalculating tax bills, and reissuing tax bills at the county level. So, and it's very clear. DOR says that. There's a lot of information out there. You cannot do a tax rebate. If you would move forward with correcting the tax bill, as Julie alluded to, there is a cost with that at the county level. You have a consultant level, you have all of that. But let's not look at just the picture of what you would be cutting a check for. Let's look bigger picture. The impact of what that does. Your TID increment is doing what it's supposed to do. You have unrecovered costs from the beginning of the TID, and you still have approximately 3 years left on that TID, or on the TID, and TID 2 is fairly new. But you have a lot of unreimbursed project costs. That TID value, that TID increment, is going to be used to repay that. Currently, the village has had a number of, from the projects that have been done in the past, whether it's road projects, building projects, marina projects, so forth, that other funds have paid. If that increment goes away, and the increment won't go away, I guess let me say that the increment won't go away. The increment will still be able to be used to pay those back. But if you reduce your operational levy, you have to do it through debt service on the levy limit worksheet. What that does then is it forces your general fund to have to pay that debt service. So right now, the village is not levying for the full amount of the debt that the village could and that the village has outstanding. They are using operational money already for that. If you reduce that by this amount, that this $330,000 that's projected, you're now going to pull that out again. And now going forward, where is that going to come from? Because your operational levy, once you reduce your levy from an operational standpoint, not the debt portion, you can only increase that levy, net new construction, or 3%. The net new construction amount, I believe, if I remember correctly, was about 2.5%. So you are very limited from an operational standpoint. Inflation alone is well over 3%. You have to consider those factors in that decision of where does that put you from a financial stability perspective looking forward, not right now at this short time. So there's multiple pieces to that. I know you talked about the capital projects. You could pull that capital projects, but it's not that simple for the capital projects because the adjustment is going to come through the debt portion as an adjustment line, which is then coming from the general fund, which then circles back through the capital projects. And then the TID has the unreimbursed project costs that have to go back to the capital projects and back to the general fund. That's the part that it's not a simple, straightforward answer, but I want to make sure that I reiterate, it's not an error. It's not an over levy situation. It is really about looking at what's the best decision long-term from a financial stability, not a short-term piece. And the process itself has not changed in what it is. Now, there is some room for maybe some more communication. No disagreement there, okay? No, and I think that's something that Adam and myself, we can help with. We can help understand the impacts of the assessment ratio, of the equalized value, and all of that, and how that plays into it. But those are the very high level, they're kind of complicated responses to what this is. But Julie, as you mentioned, the cost, again, you're talking about a cost that you're going to cut to adjust the tax bills. But I think you want to make sure that the village board is looking at what is the longer term cost potentially, because what's going to happen is your general fund balance that 5, 6, 7 years ago was not great. You're going to start pulling that fund balance back. That limits your flexibility from a cash flow perspective, from a borrowing perspective, and there's a lot of other things that go into that. So it's I know that's a lot of information in one, but I just want to make sure I kind of high level touch on that, those calculations. Adam, Julie, I don't know if there was more with that.
Amber, could you just explain a little bit? I know that there were some assessment errors that impacted the TID, and kind of explain how all of that works. And again, we don't want to point fingers because assessors have a year to correct those errors, which they did. So they're within their rights and jurisdiction. But talk a little bit about those assessment errors and how that impacted the rate that we're looking at today.
Yeah, so I mean, and I'm not an assessor, so I'm not gonna say that I am, but I can tell you from the numbers on here, you can see in the information that was provided to us and from looking on the DOR's website and what was submitted, you can see there's a $35 million correction in value. That could be a number of different things. That's a question for the assessor, but there is different things that they will move between, maybe between the TID or not between the TID and so forth. But that is all broken out on there. They make adjustments. They'll say maybe there was a partial construction done and now it's done, or that, like I said, maybe they're moving it. Maybe there was a property that should have been in the TID that wasn't classified in the TID. Those are probably the most common, but there could have been a value error in terms of how they assess that value. And then that's all laid out in that assessment roll. I don't know the ins and outs of that and haven't gotten to that point of it. That'd be the assessor side. Just from looking at that report, I can see that had a big impact on the TID's value for 2024.
Okay, which affects the rate.
Yes.
The correction affects the rate.
Adam, anything to add to that?
Well, and then so I'll put my former administrator hat on. So that to me then also is similar to when you're considering a reevaluation, is even if you keep your mill rate, even if you keep your levy flat or your mill rate flat, either one, whatever that final tax rate is, because of this prior year correction, even if you had a flat mill rate, you're going to see a tax increase, because what that means is what they were saying is there were home values that should have been in the TID. So when you shift that and your assessment drops, this was the piece of the puzzle I was trying. As we were working on this, I kept asking colleagues that there seems to be a piece we're missing. And then working with CLA, they explained this to me, and now I'm starting to see why that is. So even if you had a 0% increase, because of this prior year correction, there was the numbers are showing 10.8%. That is one heck of a coincidence that the tax bill is almost showing a 10.8% increase across the board. Now, some of that is related to the TIDs, but a lot of that increase seems to be because of this prior year correction, because now that value is in the TIDs and not accounting for the overall operations. So therefore, there is going to be an increase similar to a reevaluation. Value goes up, rate may go down or stay the same, but because now your value is higher or that proportion is being shifted around, that means you might have to pay more. And that's what we talked about with CLA today.
Okay. And then just a little bit on the Department of Revenue in the county. So when the Finance Committee met, the county had collected $16,000. As of today, they had collected $321,000 by the time Ryan reached out to us. He had talked about, he knows that we had asked about reprinting and what it would cost. As we had explained to the Finance Committee, 3 years ago, they had to reprint them for the town of Washington. At that time, it was at least $10,000. Prices have gone up. And we'd have to cover their staff costs. So that cost is unknown. And their first priority, of course, is collecting the taxes rather than rerunning and helping us at this point. But when we asked, but going backwards then, we had also asked the attorney, and as Amber said, the attorney said, you can only rerun them if you can find that it was, his words were unjust or illegal. And I know, Amber, you're saying that it's not unjust or illegal. Adam, you had talked to the Department of Revenue. What was their position as to what classifies as unjust or illegal? Or basically, is any of this unjust or illegal that we can even rerun them to get to the bottom line?
No, so it's similar to Amber's point, where she was talking about, if you were to reduce the levy, what they indicated is they basically were exactly what Amber alluded to, that what you would have to do, there was question coming from, I think, the board and on Tuesday about, well, what are the processes that could take place? And this obviously being a very unique situation, we talked about, well, could you give a refund or rebate were talked about, or would you have to rerun the tax bills? What were all the options? So we kind of put those all into the presentation and on the table. I spoke with both Vlad and I spoke with Andrea from the DOR, and what she indicated is that legally the DOR will not allow for money to be refunded without redoing the tax bills. So she indicated that you can redo them anytime you want if that is the direction that the board wants to move forward. But to Amber's point, what would have to happen is a lot of changes within, the levy limit worksheet will only allow you to reduce the debt component, as she alluded to. So that would have to be done, which then obviously has an impact to the capital projects, which has future impacts to, the debt service levy and everything else. What they recommended is if that is the direction that the village would want to move forward with, what they typically have seen is that tax bill rerun would occur after the February settlement or in conjunction with the February settlement. And so what would happen is everybody has till January 31st to essentially make their first installment of their taxes. At that point, then in February, there's a settlement that occurs, which then shows what has to be put on the remainder for the August, usually it's the end of August, is when you have to make your second payment. So what would happen is if you would want to redo the taxes, redo the tax bills, it would happen in February. They then would be able to true up. Anybody who paid in full then would just be issued a refund after that new rerun. And then the tax bills would be adjusted to account for the difference. And that amount then would be what they would owe in August. So that way, then you don't kind of have these questions of, well, who paid what, where, when. That was the recommendation that came from the Department of Revenue.
To add that to that, Adam, and the county can say yes or no to this, but even if you do that, you have a lot of people who pay up front and pay in full. Right. And if you have that and they pay the full amount and they're owed a refund, or maybe they weren't originally owed a refund, but now they are, the county has to create vendors for every single one of those taxpayers. And that is, depending on that number, that impacts your cost to the county because that's all a manual process in what they're doing. So keep that in mind as well of you have just the base cost of what that's going to cost, but you have these other outside costs that don't forget about.
And then going back to our attorney, he said, if the board decides to go that option, or if we decide to go that route, we will need a motion, second approval, etc., to find that there was something that was unjust or illegal before you even go that route, according to Randy.
So the reason for having this meeting tonight is because we've got this deadline to file with the state tomorrow. Does that still apply? I mean, Adam seems to say that this wouldn't happen until February. Does this have to happen tonight? Because it's a lot of information for us to digest. And does this deadline still apply of tonight?
No, my understanding is in talking with the DOR, they reiterated that if this is the direction that the village would want to go, you can do that at a future date. So you would have to, that's what they indicated, is that you could rerun the tax bills at a future time. And their recommendation was would be February. So I think if that is the direction that the board wants to continue having discussions, you can keep going that route.
Okay. So
am I missing anything there, Amber? I mean, I think that's the gist that I understand.
I don't know I don't know the deadline dates. I did not. Sorry, I was at a conference most of today, so I was kind of on the phone and working on this the last couple of days. But I don't know the deadline time. I guess my recommendation would be if that deadline is not. I don't know that I would rush a decision because I can tell you this has significant impacts on a lot of different things. That would be my recommendation. And to Julie's point, from a legal standpoint, and Randy's, I don't know. Like I said, right now, I have not tested your 2024, so I have not done the audit side on your 2024. But we have run through the information we have and run through the calculations, and even looking at the past. You don't have an over levy situation. So I don't know I'm not even sure the path that you would go there. So I think you would have to probably have some discussions on that side that from that perspective.
So what would if right now for this meeting tonight, we just have to have a general direction to go? Is that where this meeting is going to end up with? I mean, we're not going to be changing anything we're submitting to the state tomorrow. So Julie, is that's what we should do is discuss now and figure out which way the board would like to go?
Yeah, I see Denise has her hand up, but definitely I think the board needs to decide what they want to do. And
Okay.
then we're just going to have to let DOR and everybody else know what the board has decided.
Okay. Denise?
Two questions and a comment to Amber. I was taking notes and trying to digest everything that you were saying. And you said something about that an adjustment goes to do you remember what you said pertaining to that?
Yeah. So your levy limit worksheet that you fill out, there's a lot of things that kind of flow into that levy limit worksheet. Has your value, has your total, your prior year levy, adds in some adjustments, and it'll take out. It'll add the adjustments, take out adjustments. So it's the adjustment lines. What the most common to that would relate to the village would be your general obligation debt post 2005. And then you do have a little bit of, or you have had in the past, some of the joint fire costs that you can have on there. So that increases your levy over your allowable levy. And it is allowable. You can do that. You can put all principal and interest of GO debt post 2005 on there. You would not want to adjust that. I'm going to call it the top half of your levy limit worksheet, because once you reduce that, you only can increase it 3% or net new construction. You have no control over that at all. And inflation, like I said, is 3%. So you don't want to touch that. What you have control over is the amount of the debt that you put on your levy. Currently, I believe for the 2024, I don't have this in front of me, but if I remember correctly, it's $850,000 of debt that is on there. The village has about over $1 million in principal and interest that they would be able to, not including the new debt issued in 2024. Thus, that number, you would have to reduce that $850,000 down to about $500,000. That amount, though, is entirely restricted for debt service. If you're already putting less on the levy than what you're paying out, you now have to bring that from your general fund into your debt service to make the payments.
Okay.
If you take that out and $330,000 of levy, now you're, over time, that's going to eat away at your fund balance.
Okay.
And then, Denise, we're going to go back and talk about 5-6 years ago that we don't want to.
Right. Okay. So, Adam, then I have two questions for you. One pertaining to something that Amber just said. Is this when you came to the public hearing on the budget, what Amber was just saying, is it that you said something about we have to borrow money to be able to put it on this levy worksheet, and how that all worked. I remember you taught.
Yes, that's this point. So the way
Amber's saying.
Yes, absolutely, Denise. So what it is on the levy limit worksheet, what she is referring to is there is a section D that is adjustments to the levy limit. So as Amber alluded to, usually on your levy limit worksheet, lines 1 through, I believe it is 6 to 8 are already, that's calculated by the state. So they do that. They look at your prior information, they put that in. Then what you have the ability to do as a municipality is what is the adjustments to the levy, your Schedule D. And so This is some of the financing discussions that municipalities have, is you are allowed to adjust your levy for general obligation debt. And there are plenty of municipalities that will include, just the general obligate, that will include general operations. That's capital projects, that's your roads, everything else. Sometimes that will be water and sewer. That is general obligation related, even though you may have a service fee that covers those costs. The rule is you are allowed to put that in because it is general obligation. Now, the Department of Revenue is starting to get a bit more stricter on that, where they're monitoring that a little more. So really what they want you to focus on is really if it's truly general obligation debt that's being paid, that needs to be levied. That does not need to be covered by something else. So where this also comes into is the tax increment districts. So when you think about it, when you create a tax increment district, normally in the first few years, you do not have revenue coming in to cover the costs. So it's very possible if you're going out and doing projects or borrowing that you need to levy for that. So that's where, as Amber alluded to, you technically could be levying almost $1 million to account for some of these various options, but that requires then that your tax rate is going to go up because that's how your levy goes up. Your levy goes up, you're going to be taxing more. So that's where, as Justin is kind of presented in those long-range financing plans, there's a lot of mechanisms that are put in where we try to keep that levy, the goal has been about 850,000. And now that the TIDs have been able to, are positive, they will be able to try to help offset some of those increases that you might have for other projects to basically continue to keep that levy flat. Does that make sense?
Thank you. And then my comment or my ask would be to Julie, I would like to know what the assessment errors were that tallied $35 million. And I think that this entire board, saying that that is a key component of what has happened. We just signed a new contract with this assessor. And if this error is what has put us in this situation, I think the board needs to know the details of it, why it happened, how it happened, once we get that information, have a conversation.
Sure, we'll reach out to them and find out. I know we were all surprised to hear that today. We had not received a letter. Maybe it came a year ago to somebody else and nobody saw it, but nobody at the village saw the letter or is aware of a letter saying there was an error. So, but again, they have a year to correct it. So maybe they didn't send us a letter, but we'll dig into it and find out a little bit more about what the error was about.
And I should say, it could be there could be multiple properties. There could be multiple shifts in different situations. That's the total line. I think, Adam, that we were that's not an individual piece. That can be. And Denise, I agree that I think they should be able to give you some background on that and explain that a little bit. But I think there's probably a lot more to that. And that's definitely outside of my realm,
right?
Probably out of Adam's too, but they should be able to give you some more background on that information about what that is. So
yeah, and I think if it's okay with the board, I think I could see if I could get them to our meeting on Tuesday to explain what that was.
Yes.
If you put them there.
Yeah.
Those were the only clarifications that I needed. Thank you.
So I don't know how anybody else feels, but I don't feel like we have enough information to make a decision at this point, understanding the new things that come up. Louise? Yes, Louise.
Mr. Chair, it feels like, doesn't feel like, we got a lot of information today we didn't have for our meeting on Tuesday. I don't know why. I don't think any of us know why. And I want to apologize to any of our residents that are on the call right now.
I think
after we
simply as a matter
apologized
of-
on Tuesday.
Okay,
So, uh, I would have to say that I wish that we would have known on Tuesday. I don't know why we didn't know on Tuesday that when the purpose of the meeting was to discuss giving refunds. However, I would suggest that we get a full accounting for what happened, when it happened, how it happened, and meaning whether it was our assessors or in the past or any other process, because we
Luis, can you kill your video? You're breaking up on it.
did we get here? I don't care like who owns what. We
Luis, can you
get
kill your video,
here,
please? Turn off your video, please.
and how do we fit?
Luis,
Love to talk. I would adjourn and we today. Oh, sure. Yep. Sorry.
we didn't hear most of what you said.
Yeah. Hold on.
Did we cause that?
Okay. Is that better? We got a lot of information today that we didn't have.
Okay, and I think we just lost her entirely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we, if I may, Nate, I think we were told on Tuesday that there were phone calls made to the Department of Revenue and we were waiting for them to call back. So the phone calls were made.
Thank you, Denise. If I could finish. And then in addition to that, I would just, there seems like then there's other information that's come in. There's quite a bit of information that's come in that we're unaware of. And it's not about who did what when. However, I would like to apologize to our residents that are listening in after apologizing on Tuesday, apologizing again for what looks to be sloppy. So, Nate, I'm not quite sure. I know that we have a meeting on Tuesday, a regular village board meeting. I'm not sure if we need a special meeting aside from that because I haven't seen the agenda for that meeting yet. But I would suggest that we have our ducks in a row before we have that kind of meeting and we have all the information we need from auditors, the state, the county, Baird, our administrator, and our finance director so that there's nothing missing. So the board can make an informed decision.
Okay. Denise, would you like to finish?
I think I said what I had to
Okay.
say is that we were told a phone call. We were waiting for them to call back. That's
Okay.
what we were told on Tuesday. I presume that's what happened, and they have since returned the call.
My inclination is I think we should still go down this path to see what this is. There's no way we can make a decision tonight, but I think that we should get more information so that we can make an informed decision on this. I don't know how the other board members feel. I think that's more or less what Luis is thinking. I think you're of the same logic, Denise, but
I am of the same logic except for one thing. And that is if our legal counsel said that we don't have anything that's unjust or illegal to rerun the tax bills, that just becomes a non-option. If there is no longer a deadline to do anything, I am fine putting this on a future agenda, having a further conversation. Obviously, 3 members of the board that were not at the finance meeting on Tuesday, may still be a little bit lost because they weren't there to hear everything and all the conversation on Tuesday. So I'm fine with that. If there's no deadline to meet anymore, If there's other information, from our assessor that we would like to gather, I think that's all fine.
But I guess we don't have a deadline, but I still think that this has a great deal of urgency to it. I don't want to just say future agenda, not that that's what you're saying, Denise, but I think, yes, we don't have an immediate deadline, but I don't want to just say, okay, well, we'll deal with this as we have a chance. I think this is a higher priority. And
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Dylan, yes, you got your hand up?
Yes, hi. So just kind of to Denise and Louise's point and yours as well. I believe that we cannot make a decision tonight. I unfortunately could not make it to the finance meeting on Tuesday night. So I was filled in a bit about the situation, and I read what was included in our agenda for tonight. But the information we just got right now is a lot to process. So like Denise said, if we do not have a deadline, which was supposed to be for tomorrow, it's better that we take the time to sit down and look further into this so we can make the right decision. I don't know what the right decision would be right now.
Allison, Patrice, Kurt, would any of you have any thoughts on this?
Nate,
Yes, Patrice.
I'm on the same page as Denise and Lily and whoever else might be thinking this way. What really stuck out in my mind was that if something was not unlawful or unjust, we can't issue new tax bills. So it doesn't sound, from the explanation that we got from Amber, it doesn't sound like there was anything unlawful or unjust. So again, we need to talk about this at more length and depth and make some decisions going forward, but nothing can be decided tonight. We don't have enough information on our plate.
I too feel like we should discuss it another night, but I'm glad Amber was here to clarify kind of what the ramifications would be if we do find a way to give money back. It sounds like long term that might be more detrimental to the village than saying a mistake was made and we'll do better next year. But I agree we can't make a decision tonight, and another night would be better.
What I feel is, after all has been discussed and reading all the information coming up today, everything that happens if we make a decision today incurs a huge amount of more costs and problems for the community. And the other night when Dick Burris was talking, he said that Dick Burris was talking, and he just more or less said, run the stuff the way it is, and as we go along, we'll make the adjustments later when we know what's going on. I think everything's pretty clear right now.
I guess
I don't think blame should be put on anybody. Nobody made the mistake. It's overall what we didn't understand.
I guess I'll leave that for another time on that, Kurt, but I don't think that we should rule this out. I don't think we have enough information to say it's a good idea or not. I understand that you're saying you don't think it is based on the information at hand right now. I think I would like to see more information before I say, no, we shouldn't do this, or yes, we should. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So it sounds like everybody on the board is comfortable with that. Does everybody agree that this is still is a very urgent issue for us? And while we're unable to make a decision tonight, we do need to deal with this on an expedited basis.
Absolutely.
Yes.
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 Yeah. I said this Tuesday night. There's lots of weeds here. I can't see through these weeds. However, if you stand back, there's only 1,200 residents in this village. And
so Roger
is spending,
I appreciate what you're saying here, but the public
money.
The public comment portion is over now, Roger. So I appreciate what you're saying. I heard you on Tuesday, and you'll have another chance to comment on this.
You need to pay attention.
Okay. I believe that wraps up item 5. We have some future meetings that we're going to have to deal with this on. Julie, let's talk tomorrow about what we should put on for the Tuesday meeting. We're gonna have to have a couple changes to that. I don't think we're gonna have enough information on Tuesday to get it done, but we'll do whatever we can. And we'll make it so we can discuss as much of this as possible.
I am not available on Tuesday, so if there's questions that you have from myself, if you can have Vlad, Julie, Adam, if you can funnel those, I would just need those before that I can have a conversation and get a response back to you. Just so you know, I just want to make sure that I was upfront about that piece.
I'm going to be in the same boat for that Tuesday, but
Denise?
Amber, if you could, I'm trying to remember the email that I saw that you sent out. What you spoke of tonight, were you summarizing everything that was in that letter? I guess it would be helpful if what you said tonight you put down on paper and we could see that at our meeting, and unless it's already summarized in that other email that you sent out.
Probably not. It probably isn't, because
Okay.
that email is kind of like that was just kind of taking 4 different pieces as an example and took actually an actual tax bill. So that is not talking about the impact of reducing the debt component of the levy limit, and then how that impacts the general fund and the capital projects. None of that is really even in that piece. And I think that there's the other piece that Adam probably has to be involved in, is to really get that full picture from a long-term financial stability, is looking at the TID projections for the next 3 years and really getting some answers from the assessors, because those TID projections and knowing what the unreimbursed project costs are of the TID back to the general fund and back to capital projects, in my mind, has a huge impact on on how you would make that decision. Because if you're not going to recover those costs back that have already been gone from the general fund, and now you're going to take another hit out of there, you got to make sure that you're aware of that, and that you're thinking about that come the time that the TID closes 2027, or I think your last increment is 2028's increment, or that you would receive in 28. So there's a couple more things that would have to go into that piece that's definitely not in that original kind of example email. Really what that example email was laying out and showing that the rate TID in and TID out was the same, and then talking about the changes in the assessment ratio and the value itself was really more so in that email, if that helps to me.
So if you could summarize what you stated today, expand to your capability, even though you're not the assessor, on what the long-term effects would be, I think that would be extremely helpful for us if we have all the information, or the majority of the information, that we could talk about this on Tuesday. That's what I would like to see.
What time is that meeting on Tuesday?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
I'll see what I can do. I can put it in to words, but it might be confusing. So just if you know,
but I have a pretty good grasp.
But I think, yeah, Denise, I mean, you've been on the board a long time, that like, I'm going to talk about the fund balance, talk about that impact and the payback. I think that'll be good knowledge, and hopefully you can kind of feel out what I'm trying to say in that regard.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Julie, Adam, Vlad, do you feel like you have enough direction to try and gather all this information together as much as you can by Tuesday?
Sure, we'll try and get what we can. Louise is looking for kind of a time frame of how everything happened, is my understanding. And I'm gonna try and get a hold of the assessor, see if they can make it on Tuesday, and if not, at least explain what happened. And then Amber's gonna work on her piece, and I think that's what you're looking for, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually, the assessing piece is something that's new to, I believe, everyone today. And I would ask you to lean on the assessor pretty hard to make it there, or at least be available remotely on Tuesday.
Sure.
At this point, we only miss an assessor explanation. Everything else we already have.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think we need to understand the impact of it in the future. We'll have to put in some sort of estimated expense, which you've got a better idea of, right? Just so we can make that, we can understand the long-term ramifications and, hopefully get that laid out for us on Tuesday. Okay. All right. I think that covers that then. So we will talk about this again on Tuesday.
Okay.
I believe a motion to adjourn would be in order then.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Shampoo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
We're adjourned.